Hello there. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Sachin Kolakut, and in conjunction with Mental Health Awareness Week this week from May 2nd through 6th, I want to present a short video each day this week with some information that you might find helpful in regards to the traumas of the pandemic that I am sure we can all relate to. I am also in the process of writing a book, and as a result of that, I want to get this information out as quickly as possible so others can begin to heal. I am also in the process of finishing up and working on my complimentary website to go along with the book, and it's called addictedtofear.org. Please bear with me over the next few minutes as I am new to creating these video blogs. Well, so what is trauma? As there seems not to be one agreed upon definition of trauma, here are some examples of what is already out there. According to Gabor Mate, who is internationally known as a trauma specialist and currently is based out of British Columbia, he defines trauma as, quote, "It's not what happens to us, but what happens inside of us as a result of what happens to us." Psychology Today defines trauma as, quote, "an emotional response to a distressing event." And my personal definition of trauma is similar to Gabor's, and it is, trauma is the story you attach to the events that happen to you. There are generally two types of trauma that people can endure in their lifetime, and the most commonly known one is called post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. And this is generally referred to as a singular event that causes distress. So, for example, this could include a global event that occurred, such as 9/11. This could be an event that threatened your physical body, such as a physical attack of any kind, or an event that you witnessed, such as a brutal car accident or violence you witnessed maybe in your childhood even. The next trauma that people endure or can endure in their lifetime is called complex post-traumatic stress disorder, or CPTSD. And this is a prolonged series of events. So in that regard, we can all say we have CPTSD because of what has occurred within our society globally for over 2 years, that is known as COVID-19. Let me explain and give you some examples of these such traumas in the past 2 years. See if you yourself can relate to any of them that I'm about to speak on. Trauma is being told that we are dangerous to each other, so stay home to flatten the curve and do not leave for 2 weeks. Trauma is having those 2 weeks to slow the spread turn into 2 months, and then 2 years. And then we don't know how much longer because they're ever-changing rules. Trauma is being told repeatedly by the media that there's this deadly, dangerous virus out there that could cause everybody to drop dead in the streets. Trauma is being told that we are only allowed to go out shopping if we wear a mask and stand 6 feet apart. And if you don't want to follow those rules, you order your items online and have them delivered to your home. Trauma is wearing a mask and having a panic attack with it on because of an already traumatic event in our past. Trauma is feeling forced to harm our bodies because we can't breathe in a mask, when breath is the only thing that we must have in order to live. It is one of the most basic things we need. Trauma is believing you have an immune system that can handle a virus like it has always done in the past, but then having people scream at you to, quote, "trust the science" of who? Strangers I don't know who are on the television? Trauma is being kicked out of stores or being refused service because you aren't wearing a mask, even if you have a medical condition and are exempt. Trauma is having an exemption, but having to explain it and prove it to others. Trauma is finding information about the dangers of masks and trying to help others so that you can protect and help them, and having them turn around and call you a conspiracy theorist. Trauma is going along with the crowd and wearing a mask because we are afraid of other people's reactions. This is very, very common. Trauma is seeing the fear in people's eyes if you happen to sneeze or blow your nose around them during COVID-19. Trauma is people coming at you aggressively in a grocery store because they are so afraid of you not standing on your dot on the floor. Trauma is finding out that masks are very harmful and full of bacteria that harms our immune systems when we have been wearing them all this time. Trauma is not being able to protect our children or other people's children from their parents, schools, or governments. Trauma is fighting for your children because you separated from your ex and you disagree on what their health care should be. Trauma is having constant legal battles in a corrupt legal system that always sides with, quote, healthcare for the children's best interest when you know the judges are likely paid off to follow the narrative. Trauma is finding out your child is being tested and or injected against your wishes. Trauma is believing your child needs to be tested and or injected as a means of safety. Trauma is going to spend time with your child for your parenting time, and they are too scared to go with you. Trauma is not being able to see your kids for parenting time because the other parent thinks it's too dangerous. Trauma is telling your kids it's for everyone's protection and forcing the kids to wear masks and then finding out it's been harming them all along. Trauma is sending the kids to school while being told they have to wear a mask and suffocate in order to participate. Trauma is realizing that child abuse is all around us. Trauma is witnessing kids wearing masks and seeing the sadness in their eyes because they can't breathe when you know it's child abuse. Trauma is being a child or a youth wearing a mask without possibly knowing it's causing hypoxia, which causes brain damage. Trauma in itself causes brain damage. It changes the brain. Trauma is being a child or youth and not being able to go to school or play with and visit friends. Trauma is being a child or youth stuck in a volatile home situation with nowhere else to go because maybe school and or friends was a part of your safety. Trauma is being a child or youth trying to sort through all this confusion while feeling unsafe from everything and everyone. Trauma is being teased at school for wearing a mask or being teased at school for not wearing a mask. So you're wondering, where do I fit in? Trauma is being a youth wondering, when will we get back to normal? Trauma is having your parents tell you that you have to stifle your breathing to protect grandparents and others around you. Trauma is finding out that your teenager or your grandchild committed suicide. Trauma is being in a care home and not being able to see your kids or your grandkids. Trauma is being in a care home and not having the strength or ability to protect yourself from being forced to wear a mask so you can be around others, but not being able to touch or hug them. Trauma is being in a care home with people you trust with your health and being convinced to get dangerous and harmful experimental injections. Trauma is being in a care home where everyone around you suddenly starts dying. Trauma is being a nurse or a care aide and seeing the connection between the senior's death and the injections. Trauma is being a senior at home, too afraid to leave the house because your health is fragile and you don't want to get sick. Trauma is being told you could be asymptomatic, so you need to be tested. This used to be diagnosed as hypochondria, which means regularly checking yourself for any kind of illness. Trauma is having a PCR test shoved up your nose, which damages your cribriform plate. Trauma is being told you can't do anything, not even work, unless you get tested regularly. Trauma is being blamed for others getting sick. So you're blamed for others getting sick even though you haven't been sick. Trauma is being told to quarantine for 2 weeks because you have a cold or a flu. Trauma is not being able to work for 2 weeks because you have a cold or flu and are living paycheck to pay bills, so now you're forced into poverty and potentially homelessness. Trauma is being forced to stay away from work or school or social gatherings or family. Trauma is being divided within the family because they are afraid and you are not. Trauma is feeling like you have to help family members because they are financially struggling. Trauma is finding out a family member committed suicide. Trauma is losing friendships because you don't see eye to eye on these topics. Trauma is finding out a friend committed suicide or a friend's child committed suicide. Trauma is being forced to take a PCR test or an injection you don't want just to be able to fly. Trauma is being forced to be injected just to go and see your family, maybe who are in care homes. Trauma is being forced to be injected and have a severe but adverse reaction, only to be told that you have anxiety when you know that that's a lie. Trauma is being forced to stay away from family because you won't be injected. Trauma is being forced to be injected just to keep your employment. Trauma is needing to show injection papers just to go out to eat. Trauma is finding out that the injection is experimental when you didn't think it was or didn't know it was. Trauma is finding out that, quote, safe and effective is just a mantra to convince people to participate in the experiment. Trauma is finding out that the injection is causing side effects. Trauma is finding out the injection is dangerous and changes your DNA. Trauma is witnessing people having side effects and or dying from them. Trauma is finding out a family member or friend died from an injection or medical negligence. Trauma is needing a PCR test or an injection just to get medical care or life-saving surgeries or treatments. Trauma is finding out that the people who we thought cared about us really didn't, including doctors, the media, and the government. Trauma is being in a psychological war you didn't even know you were in. Statistics show that people who have experienced trauma are 4 times more likely to become an alcoholic, are 4 times more likely to develop a sexually transmitted disease, are 4 times more likely to inject drugs, are 3 times more likely to end up on antidepressant medication, are 3 times more likely to be absent from work, are 15 times more likely to commit suicide, are 2.5 times more likely to smoke cigarettes, are 3 times more likely to have serious job problems, and are 3 times more likely to experience depression. How we heal from trauma? Well, the one good thing about this particular COVID-19 is realizing we've all experienced trauma in the past 2 years in one way or another, which actually brings many of us closer together through it all. It is realizing that you aren't alone in your experiences, and in that we will find a level of safety. And the only way that we can heal is when we feel safe. And this is well statistically documented and scientifically proven. So until you feel safe in your environment, you will be stuck in trauma. And all I want to share with you is that you are not alone in this. You are not alone through this. We understand. The takeaway is that no one has gotten out of this entire pandemic without being traumatized. And in that is where we finally can find peace, knowing we truly reacted normally to very abnormal situations. I'm okay, and you're okay, and together we can heal. Thanks for watching.